Hidden away behind the gilded fencing of Buckingham Palace, a disturbing situation has reportedly been unfolding. Longtime staff members, loyal to the crown for decades, have started murmuring about Queen Camilla's recent actions. They allege that she has been subtly orchestrating moves to marginalize Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. These maneuverings supposedly include shifting Princess Diana's jewelry, rearranging personal photos, and curtailing the children's time with King Charles. One has to wonder what could drive a queen to seemingly work against the interests of young children, and what might occur when their father learns of it. Join us as we explore the startling reality that those closest to the crown are now preparing to disclose. The unsettling atmosphere started faintly, so much so that for months no one wanted to admit what was happening. Palace aides, who pride themselves on their silence and devotion, found themselves exchanging worried looks in the corridors. They began to spot minor alterations, tiny adjustments that meant little on their own, but together created a disturbing mosaic. At the heart of this shifting dynamic was Queen Camilla, and the staff could no longer ignore the pattern unfolding before them. The first person to truly take note was Margaret Brown, a veteran housekeeper serving at Buckingham Palace since 2008. She had witnessed Prince George evolve from an infant into the self-assured 11-year-old boy he is today. She had seen Princess Charlotte bloom from a timid toddler into a graceful 9-year-old girl. She had even held Prince Louis when he was mere hours old back in 2018. To her, these royal children were far more than just a professional responsibility. They were a cherished part of her daily existence. In early November of 2024, Margaret was tidying the family drawing room for a private event when she realized several frames had been moved. They hadn't been thrown away, but rather shuffled to much less visible spots within the room. Pictures of George, Charlotte, and Louis that had rested on the primary mantel for years were now shoved onto bottom shelves. In their previous spots stood fresh photos from King Charles and Queen Camilla's recent diplomatic trip to France. These new displays included images of Camilla with her own grandchildren and formal portraits of the king and queen unaccompanied. Margaret tried to convince herself it was nothing significant, reasoning that as queen, Camilla had every right to decorate. However, something about the rearrangement felt inherently off, as those specific photos of William's children had been placed there by the late Queen Elizabeth. They symbolized the future of the institution and the direct line of succession, so moving them felt like an erasure rather than a refresh. She casually brought up the matter to Patricia, an older housekeeper who had been with the family since 1995. Patricia's expression went rigid as she listened to Margaret's description, and then she shared a troubling observation of her own. Just the week prior, Patricia had been ordered to take several of Princess Diana's personal effects out of storage. She was told to move them to a remote archive located in a building completely separate from the main palace. This directive had come straight from Camilla's private secretary, bypassing both the king and Prince William entirely. By December, more members of the household staff were beginning to pick up on these unusual occurrences. A nanny responsible for the children during holidays noted that their scheduled visits with the king had been quietly cut back. Where Charles once carved out time to see his grandchildren twice a week, The visits had dwindled to perhaps once a fortnight. When the nanny asked about rescheduling, she was informed that the king's diary was being managed with much greater strictness. The claim was that Queen Camilla felt he was working too hard and required more downtime for his health. The children, being young and flexible, accepted these excuses, but the nanny knew something was amiss. King Charles absolutely cherished his grandchildren and had always prioritized them, regardless of his workload. The notion that he was suddenly too occupied or exhausted to see them simply didn't ring true to his character. It seemed evident that someone was gatekeeping his access to the family, and that person appeared to be his wife. By January 20th, the hushed conversations among the palace workforce had become louder and more frequent. They gossiped in supply rooms and pantries, stealing moments when they felt safe from prying ears. They compared stories and tried to rationalize what they were seeing, wondering if Camilla truly held a grudge against William's children. They questioned if she viewed them as threats or living reminders of Diana, the woman whose shadow she could never escape. Nobody wanted to accept it, but there was a calculated pattern of diminishing the visibility of George, Charlotte, and Louis. The terrifying question looming over everyone was whether Prince William could see what the staff saw. The annual Christmas card photo shoot became the next flashpoint in this unfolding internal drama. Traditionally, this image is a carefully staged hierarchy, with the monarch at the center, surrounded by direct heirs. Planning for the 24 photograph began in early December, marking the second holiday season of Charles's reign. This was the first year Queen Camilla felt secure enough to assert her own ideas on the arrangement. While she had deferred to tradition previously, she was now ready to imprint her own style on royal customs. During a November meeting, Camilla presented reference photos from European royal families showing blended groups. She pointed out how stepchildren and extended relatives were included in warm, inclusive portraits in Spain and Norway. This was her vision for the British card, a massive modern family photo including her son, daughter, and their children. She wanted to demonstrate to the world that the monarchy had evolved beyond strict bloodlines. The private secretaries looked nervous, and the photographer studied his shoes, avoiding eye contact. Eventually, a senior aide gently noted that the Christmas card typically reflects the constitutional line of succession. He warned that including non-royal family members might confuse the public regarding the institution's structure. Camilla kept smiling, but her gaze turned icy as she asked why her grandchildren should be left out. She questioned why her son's children should be treated as lesser than William's, or why her daughter's family should remain invisible. She asked if she was not queen, and if her own family did not matter in the grand scheme of things. The aide tried to explain that it wasn't personal, but rather a matter of constitutional significance for an official document. Camilla listened with dangerous patience before turning to her husband to ask for his opinion. Charles, caught between tradition and his wife's need for validation, sought a middle ground, as he often did. He suggested taking two photos, one traditional succession image and one casual shot with Camilla's entire family. Camilla agreed to this, but her team immediately began working to blur the distinction between the two versions. They instructed the photographer to make both images look equally official and proposed releasing both to the press. Draft press releases were written to describe the expanded photo, as a reflection of a modern blended Britain. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was alerted to these schemes in mid-December by a trusted staff member. The whistleblower showed Catherine the draft materials, pointing out that the language didn't specify which photo was official. It was clear that the larger family image was being positioned as equally, if not more, important. Catherine read the documents, her expression hardening as she realized exactly what Camilla was attempting to do. If the press had the choice, they would likely print the warmer, larger photo, reducing George, Charlotte, and Louis to mere faces in a crowd. They would no longer be the future of the monarchy, but simply part of Camilla's extended entourage. Catherine thanked the staff member and went straight to William, finding him in his study. She closed the door, sat down, and laid out the entire plan that was being hatched behind their backs. William listened in silence, his jaw clenching as he heard how his children were being visually diminished. He stood up, looked out the window, and then told his wife that his father needed to manage his wife better. He stated that while Camilla could have her title, she could not rewrite constitutional order to soothe her insecurities. George, Charlotte, and Louis were the direct heirs, while Camilla's grandchildren held no constitutional rank whatsoever. William vowed to speak to his father privately to ensure only one official photo was released. He refused to let his children be absorbed into a false narrative of equal family standing. The meeting between William and Charles took place 2 days later at Clarence's house, with no staff present. Witnesses saw William leaving with a look of determination that reminded them of his grandfather, Prince Philip. When the official photo was released on December 9th, it showed only the king, queen, and the Wales family. It was traditional and constitutional, exactly as protocol dictated, with no second expanded image released. Staff were ordered to delete drafts of the alternative plan, and Camilla reportedly said nothing publicly. However, insiders claimed she was furious, barely speaking to William and remarking that she felt like an outsider. Catherine realized this was a test of boundaries, and although William had won, the war was just beginning. The next conflict would be far more personal, involving the erasure of Princess Diana's enduring legacy. Diana has been gone for 27 years, yet her presence remains a tangible force within the family. Her sons carry her spirit in their charity work and their openness about mental health. For the royal children, Diana existed through stories, photos, and the jewelry their mother wore. Queen Elizabeth had carefully arranged for specific items to be held in trust for Charlotte and Louis. These included sapphire earrings and personal letters meant to be given to the children when they came of age. In January 25, an archivist named Jonathan Hayes discovered these items were missing from the secure vault. Digital records showed they had been transferred to the General Royal Collection and Archives without William's knowledge. The authorization came from Camilla's office, citing security concerns as the reason for moving the valuables. Jonathan knew that security was often a cover for sensitive political maneuvers within the palace. He confirmed with a colleague that the items were now filed in the General Archives, no longer designated for William's children. Risking his career, he called Kensington Palace to speak directly with Catherine's private secretary. The silence on the other end confirmed that neither Catherine nor William had any idea about the transfer. Catherine's secretary asked for copies of the documents and urged him to keep the conversation confidential. Catherine felt a chill, realizing this was a systematic attempt to remove Diana's physical trace from the children's lives. She showed William the documents that evening, and his confusion quickly turned to anger. He called his father immediately, interrupting the king's dinner to demand the return of the items. He made it clear that every single object had to be returned to its original location within the week. He insisted that any future decisions regarding his mother's belongings required his written approval. Charles tried to defend Camilla's actions as helpful, but William cut him off abruptly. The items were returned, but Catherine now understood that Camilla viewed Diana's grandchildren as threats to be neutralized. This tension recalled the humiliation surrounding the coronation back in May of 2020. The ceremony was meant to be a moment of unity, with Prince George serving as a page of honor. William and Catherine had prepped George extensively, explaining the history and the eyes of the world upon him. However, weeks before the event, revised seating charts began circulating that repositioned Charlotte and Louis. Instead of sitting directly behind their parents, they were moved back and obscured by other relatives. In their prime seats, the charts placed Camilla's biological grandchildren, confusing the planning committee. A staff member noticed the change had come from the Queen Consort's office, justified by a need for family closeness. Knowing protocol favored the heirs, the staffer alerted a supervisor who quietly tipped off Prince William's team. William was shown the two versions of the chart during a break in his schedule. He demanded to know if his father had approved the change, but learned there had been no response from the king. Refusing to let his children be pushed aside, he requested an urgent meeting with his father. Charles was caught off guard, having not realized the implications of the changes Camilla had requested. Camilla joined the meeting uninvited, arguing defensively that her family deserved to be part of history. She claimed modern families are blended and her grandchildren should not be relegated to distant seats. William countered that while they were welcome, they would not displace the second, third, and fourth in line to the throne. The room fell silent as Charles was forced to choose between his wife's wishes and constitutional reality. Ultimately, Charles restored the original arrangement, placing Charlotte and Louis in the second row where they belonged. On the day of the coronation, Camilla smiled, but those close to her could see the simmering resentment. Following that defeat, Camilla changed tactics, moving to isolate William's children through holiday scheduling. She proposed splitting the Balmoral summer gathering into 2 separate weeks to avoid overcrowding. This effectively cut George, Charlotte, and Louis off from their cousins and the broader extended family. Catherine noticed immediately that the children were missing out on vital bonding time with their relatives. William felt powerless to object since his father had already signed off on the practical plan. The situation reached a breaking point in January 25 during a family dinner at Windsor Castle. The discussion turned to Easter plans, and Camilla suggested including her grandchildren in the traditional egg hunt. Catherine spoke up, stating that the event was historically for the children of working royals. Camilla argued back, claiming the monarchy needed to be more inclusive and modernize its definition of family. William finally lost his composure, standing up and declaring he was done with her manipulations. He listed her offenses, from moving Diana's items to marginalizing his children in photos and schedules. He told his father he had failed to protect the family from a woman who viewed the children as obstacles. William delivered an ultimatum. If the behavior didn't stop, he would limit the children's contact with Charles. The dinner ended in chaos, with Anne telling Charles that William was absolutely right. Emergency meetings followed, but the core issue was the standoff between father and son. Charles Boulez was forced to realize he had to rein in his wife or lose his relationship with his heir. Catherine formed an alliance with Princess Anne to stand against Camilla's agenda. An uneasy truce was established, ensuring Diana's items were safe and the children were prioritized. However, everyone knew this was merely a temporary ceasefire in a much larger conflict. The fundamental tensions remained, and palace insiders worried about what would happen when the truce inevitably broke. The fear is that the monarchy cannot survive a public civil war between the king and the Prince of Wales. Staff are quietly updating their resumes, fearing the institution might crumble under the pressure. Across Britain, people are left wondering how long this fragile peace can possibly last. The future of the crown depends on 3 children who are currently caught in the crossfire. If you found this story compelling, please like, subscribe, and click the video on your screen for more.